Okay, well, for anybody who's out there in internet land, welcome. My name is Audra Travelby, and I am the Executive Director of Culture Connection AZ. If you've never heard of us, we are a new nonprofit in Flagstaff, Arizona, and our mission is to connect people of different cultures, backgrounds, and lived experiences in order to create a more compassionate, interconnected, and informed community here in Flagstaff. Our programs specifically focus on looking at and learning about other cultures, different cultures, as well as different areas of the humanities, including arts, history, philosophy, anthropology, archaeology, psychology, all the ologies. And we have lots of fun programs going on. So if you've never heard of us before, I encourage you to check out our website at www.cultureconnectionaz.org. And tonight we're going to be talking about disability and inclusion in the tabletop gaming community, which I'm really excited for. We are broadcasting live on Facebook, so we encourage you to use the live chat function to ask any questions or chime in with the discussion at any time that you would like to share something. We really encourage you to share your own experiences with gaming and how that relates to the disability community. My friend here is John Compton. He is the game development manager of Peppercorn Games, and he also runs the awesome Nerd Nights that happen on the second Tuesday at Historic Brewery. So welcome, John. I'm really excited for our discussion tonight.
Thanks for having me, pal.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like this stuff a lot. Yeah, it's going to be a good time.
Very cool.
Again, we do interactive theater, immersive theater events in town, as well as board game events. And we also publish tabletop role-playing games through Peppercorn Games. Please come hang out with us sometime.
That is awesome. So for people, because I just recently found out about this whole universe, so for people that may not have, their nerd PhD yet, what is the tabletop gaming community?
Yeah, so, the tabletop gaming community in general is sort of anything board game related, realistically. So anything that you would play at a table with friends. There's lots of online resources as well. But generally, when you think of like tabletop gaming, you think of, hey, we have a table, and it could be, Candyland, it could be a deck of cards, technically counts. It's whatever, right? But the tabletop role-playing game community is sort of a smaller subset of that. And role-playing games, you don't necessarily need that nerd PhD to be aware that we have all done this, right? We have all played role-playing games. We lose that in adulthood.
Yep.
But when you played make-believe as a kid, or when you when you play like a game of chess and you're like, oh, this little dude's going to do this, or like, she's going to go attack him. You're sort of like putting a bit of yourself into it, and you're playing a role, right? So anything from the crunchiest like D&D type games, which is what kind of everyone thinks about as the classic role-playing game. But even just sort of a shared storytelling around a campfire is a role-playing game, right? It's where you either embody a new character, right? Or you give it some of your traits, or, sometimes it's just completely random, right? And you make decisions for that character, like a choose your own adventure book. Like, who this person is, and you sort of make decisions that you believe that they would make. And that's been going on it's like the Prussians invented the predecessor to chess. Like, but we've all played role-playing games, usually as kids.
Yeah.
But the classic D&D, things like that, people started telling stories around the campfire, constellation stories or whatever, as a role-playing game. And you say, oh, I think that this. But it became more gamified when you started involving dice or just rules to how to tell the story, right? We've all kind of had that friend as a kid that, you're playing like, oh, I'm the space captain, and they're like, oh, well, I've got the bigger ship, and then it's like, well, no, my ship does twice as much, and they're like, my ship does infinity as much, right? So the rules of these sort of tabletop games prevent you from going way overboard and ruining the story for everyone else. But that's all the crunch part. That's all the dice and stuff like that is randomization and to help make the story flow a little bit better between people.
So have you been in it since you were a kid, or did you have like a kind of like a lot of people where you become an adult, you kind of stop engaging with those role-playing activities? Was it just like a transition straight into it for you, or
well, I mean, as a kid, I would make like little houses for, the fae that I assumed lived in the woods and things like that, because I read it in some book. I loved playing as a kid and imagining these roles for different characters. And, you've got your little Star Wars action figures and, what would Han Solo do in this situation? What would Greedo do in this situation? And then I kind of lost track of it, I suppose. And then when I was in college, I kind of picked up more of the academic role-playing games. So, you think of like a philosophy class and just deciding philosophically what you should do in a particular scenario, right? And that's definitely role-playing. And then I attended some classes that use role-playing, and then kind of fell out of it a little bit more. And I always liked it, right? But it wasn't until I went to one of the free RPG days here in town, actually here in Flag, and they gave out a bunch of free books that I really started diving into it, right? Because you think, oh, it's D&D, it's like dragons and fighting, but there's so many more role-playing games out there that aren't just about fighting, and there are a ton about fighting too, but they're not all about that. And it really opened my eyes to the community, and I was like, oh, this is fun. I'm gonna start doing this. And so, yeah, shout out to the free RPG days. I think this year's already happened, but next year, keep a lookout for it. You just show up. Tons of people will run games for you. They'll give away a bunch of free dice and books. And the community is always really, really inviting and warm and welcoming, saying, hey, come on, I'll teach you how to play this one. Oh, come on, I'll teach you how to play this one. And you get a real good feel for it. But yeah, it wasn't until I was in town that I really started going deep dive into it in that sort of way.
So you didn't grow up here in Flagstaff?
No. We moved around a lot. Last place was in Indiana, but most of the childhood was in Florida. So
okay, wow, you've been all over the place.
Yeah,
nice. So I wanted to kind of go into the main topic of our discussion tonight, and I read this really cool quote. I was read a couple things specifically about role-playing games and inclusion and what the community is like now versus how it's been in the past. And one of the things that I really stuck out to me, and I'm going to read the quote because I'm just that kind of a person. So
I want to hear the quote.
It's by Coleman Loretto, and it was from something they wrote on screenrant.com. And it says, the storytelling principles of tabletop RPGs or role-playing games give gamers with disabilities the chance to tell stories where characters like them are heroes, challenge the toxic assumption that people with disabilities are broken, and bridge the gap between themselves and non-disabled people through understanding and empathy building acts of creativity. I'm wondering if this quote resonates with you as much as it resonated with me, and if you would feel comfortable sharing any personal experiences that you've had similar to what they're describing.
I mean, that very much resonates, right? It's a shared storytelling game, and so you can craft the story how you want, and you sort of develop an alter ego if you need to, or embody someone that you might not have any idea, what their life might be like, and make decisions that you believe that they would make and have to act as they act. So you're playing them as a role, right? So I guess for me, it's a lot of like social stuff, And sort of finding, I like to make characters that are more outgoing than me, little social butterflies, and just kind of like play around with that, right? But I feel like it goes into two camps, right? You've got representation and sort of like not escapism, but some sort of like I want to be someone different, right? And I want to kind of test that person out to see how it works with the world, see how I like that other person, right? So I would consider that kind of the escapist side that I enjoy sometimes. So it's like, well, what would it be like if I was different? And then let's check this person out. Right. And then sometimes it's to come to terms with things. So you sort of make a character that has all of your flaws, and you start to make more appropriate decisions for them, because you can sort of like, you can disassociate a little bit and say like, wow, that's Thomas over there doing that. That's Thomas coming to terms with these things. Yeah. That answer your,
It does, yeah. I'm curious, like, because obviously you're really involved in the gaming community here in Flagstaff. Have other people shared with you similar feelings or similar experiences that they've had, just maybe feeling like they finally found a community where they can be themselves, where they can feel accepted for who they are?
And maybe I'll drift the story around into semi hypotheticals. But yeah, people that are coming to terms with trauma a lot of times will either try and make a character that, I GM, or I run the games a lot. Right. I've run them a lot of conventions, and a lot of times for randos and people on the internet and just whoever. And so some people, again, yeah, it really is divided into a couple camps. Like some people really just want to create a character. I'm trying to think of any specifics that I could drift into. Someone with a lot of like PTSD. Might create a character that they put in situations that they have a hard time dealing with, right? Because you can disassociate from that character,
right? And
you can say like, well, what would they do? What would be a healthy decision for that person to make?
Yeah.
And then it's okay. Well, yeah. I mean, that makes sense, because when it comes to especially social, emotional, or mental challenges, it can be hard in the moment, right, to make those decisions. And so playing a role gives you time to think about it, strategize about it, know what the right answer is, and make that right answer. And it starts to become more second nature to you. So, and then there's people with physical challenges as well. And so in the tabletop community, there's the two sides, right? So there's people want a lot more representation, right? They want to see people that are similar to them, right? Tabletop. And for the longest time, it was dominated by people that look and act like me. And that's been changing a lot. And there's some really, really great resources out there for people that want representation in the tabletop community, and a lot of like modifications to games that were pre-existing. So they call it, they say like, we want more ramps in dungeons, is like the kind of go-to phrase for these mods. Is like, let's make this a more accessible dungeon for the characters in them, right? But the tabletop community has always been really, really good about helping people physically at the table, right? With I don't think there's a single module or gaming manual out there that can't be ordered in an accessible style. And then, you always have sort of these ideas of the X card at a game, or the red light, yellow light, green light. If you're not familiar with that, the tradition was to have a sheet of paper with a big X on it, and each player would get one. And if the GM started to drift into a topic that made you uncomfortable, you could just sort of like hover your hand kind of near that X, and the person that was telling the story would know. We avoid that. We don't even talk about it. It's just we fast forward. And then now they'll do sort of like the green, yellow, red light, where it's like yellow light means you can sort of like describe that this happens, but you're not going to go into any detail. Red light means we're done with that. We move on. And that's specifically for people with, traumas or topics that they don't feel comfortable with. In general, I don't like blood, so I'll smash that red button when if someone starts to go into detail. But that's always a really helpful thing.
So any player in the game at any time has the option to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. And that goes way back, the X card. Okay. At conventions, a lot of conventions make you say, look, I will adhere to the X card or I will leave. Okay. It's always been a really, really open community. It's been made into a very, very open community for quite a while now, as a way to kind of, because we all want to tell this story together, whether it's our story or an idealized version of ourselves, or a completely different person that we want to sort of experience living in their shoes for a little bit, and to facilitate that, you have to be you just have to be cool. Yeah. You just have to be nice to people, and it works out great.
Have you had that experience when you were acting as the GM of somebody smashing the red button? Or
yeah, it's not uncommon. Okay. A lot of times you don't realize it. I mean, it could be something like spiders, or it could be something like a veteran with PTSD doesn't like the detail that you're going into, or it could be someone whatever, right? Whatever trauma might be in their past, or whatever trauma they might be dealing with, right? You don't want to trigger them, but you also don't want to make light of their situation, because it's a game, and so at some point you have to question whether or not you're sort of making a game out of someone's difficulties, right?
Yeah, their life experience, sure. Yeah. And is it, when that happens, is it hard to pivot? Do you have to kind of on the fly come up with a new story, or?
Well, I mean, so the GM's job is to just make sure everyone follows the rules.
Okay.
And you'll provide like a story hook, but it's just a shared storytelling encounter, right? So in the simplest form, you just sort of go around the circle and you say, I think the cat should climb out the window. And then the person says next, I think the cat should eat a bug. And the next person says, I think the cat should go get some water, right? But when you start to involve the dice, you just need someone to advocate for the dice, and that's the person in charge of the table. So like there isn't much. It's not like you write this huge. If you write a huge elaborate story as a GM, which a lot do, just write your book, write your book and then read it to your friends. So the GM's job is to pivot quickly at whatever the players want to do. And so it's really easy to, if you're just talking about something and you see someone hover over that X card, just keep going, talk about something else, pull something else out. You probably have a binder full of notes, pick one of those. But you can do it pretty seamlessly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you don't call people out. No one calls anyone out. You just sort of keep going, and you keep in mind kind of what they didn't care for, or what made them uncomfortable, and try not to go back to that. Okay.
I love how it's so flexible, and it can be so immediately responsive to somebody saying, wait a minute, let's not go there. That's really, really cool.
Yeah. They also have the concept of the veil, which is the same sort of thing, right? This veil where you could sort of see what's happening, but you don't have details, and then you can back yourself up a little bit further. So different tabletop groups do it different ways, but it is really nice to just let's move on,
Yeah. And I mean, it's hard to think of another situation in life where you actually have the chance to do that. So, I mean, I can see why it would be so welcoming for so many different kinds of people, and especially for people that might have like a social anxiety issue or something like, to know that all I have to do is say, you know what, I'm not really comfortable with this. And everybody just goes, okay. And like, nobody questions it. And we all just move on. It doesn't hold up the game. It doesn't single anybody out. I think that's amazing.
Nice.
I definitely get the appeal. So trying to think. So have you seen any, I think we might have touched on this briefly earlier, but are you aware of, or have you seen any, because one of the articles when I was kind of doing my nerdy research into this talked about the use actually in therapeutic context and in educational context, like by teachers and by therapists and by psychologists. So I'm curious if you know any more about that, or if you want to speak to that a little bit, if you have any experience with that.
Sure. So, as far as just education is concerned, it's there's a system that I played in college called Reacting to the Past. And it's just a role-playing game that kind of puts you into the mind of historical figures or regular people. You sort of go through and you play as them. It's not dice heavy. I don't think it actually used any dice, but you would write papers based on what you believe that they would do and how they would act and things like that. But in general, it's a great social activity, right? I know a lot of places will use it for like senior citizens to get them out. It's good for anyone that's dealing with isolation, or like has isolationist bents, such as myself, to sort of like be social in a controlled environment. Usually you're playing with friends, or family, or other people that and aren't gonna be weird, and you can be social without draining that social battery as easily, right? Because I'm not at a big party. Thomas, my character, is at a big party, right? And Thomas is going to go hang out with a bunch of people and be very charismatic and blah 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 blah. But it's just me sitting with 3 of my friends, right? And it can kind of break you out of some shells. Like that, because you can incorporate things that you're having trouble with, right? Without even letting anyone know, right? You can test out these situations that might be blocks in your mind, or social blocks, mental blocks, emotional blocks, whatever. You can sort of like guide your character into fixing those, and that kind of happens naturally. A lot of people will play a version of themselves, right? Or an idealized version of themselves, or who they aspire to be. And, every good role-playing game is a hero's journey where you're the hero, right? You want to follow kind of that Campbellian loop, where, you start out as you are and you end up coming back to the real world with a better outlook. The world has not changed, but you have changed because of this adventure you've had. Sort of that classic hero's journey. And so, that meeting with the goddess, or the, road of trials, doesn't necessarily need to be the real world road of trials. You can see how an idealized version of you would act in tough situations,
right?
And play with it. So that's a lot as a therapeutic tool. It can be you're going to create a version of yourself that has similar whatever it is that you are struggling with, right? And then have them deal with it.
Yeah.
And so I've seen it used quite a bit as a therapeutic tool for that. That way. So yeah, just in general, getting people out of isolation when they're dealing with social hermitism, I
Right.
guess. But also, as a therapeutic tool,
Yeah.
it's often used in like group therapies as a way to sort of like fast forward yourself through difficult situations and see how to react to them in healthy ways.
Okay.
And then also just to come to terms with things, if it's sort of a mental block about whatever's going on in your life, right?
Mhm.
Um, yeah, you can see that, well, my character thrives because of these decisions I've made. I can make these decisions for myself as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, potential to be really powerful.
There's quite a bit of uh, sort of what do you call them? Like gaming therapy groups out there
Okay.
that are great. Check them out.
Do they have
Some,
specific, is it, they're like, there's this group for people specifically that have PTSD or, certain, or is it just kind of?
so usually, so what I've seen are the game masters setting up these group therapy sessions.
Okay.
I've seen them be very diverse, and
Yeah.
I've seen them be very specific as well.
Okay.
Trying to think. Usually, if it's a social or if you're somewhere neuroatypical,
Mhm.
it tends to be the fantasy ones, and I don't know why. But people like them more,
Mhm.
where you're sort of like with dragons and things like that.
Yeah.
And I've seen people more lean towards the futurism. So either like the cyberpunk genres or like diesel punk genres or like far future when it comes to like physical challenges.
Okay.
And I think I know why that tends to be the future stuff. I don't know why the past, that sort of like high fantasy draws
Mhm.
so much of that other side. Tradition, I don't know, but there are plenty of groups you can check out. I don't know, look on Reddit for a group, but there are also I know you can get trained in therapeutic tabletop
Oh, nice.
through a group that was started a while ago. I'm struggling to remember their name. I think it might be like Game Master Therapy.
Okay.
And yeah, there's a lot more organizations than you think. Tabletop is huge, and so there are plenty of organizations out there that can help you out if you're looking to get into tabletop gaming and would like to use it as a therapeutic tool. Just look around. There's tons. You'll have a great time.
That's so amazing because I have a couple of friends that are therapists, and I mean, especially with COVID, they have wait lists that are 4 or 5 months long. So to know that there's alternatives to just waiting for a counselor, to talk one-on-one with, I think that's really important for people to know. And obviously it's not going to be a substitute for a professional counselor one-on-one session,
No.
but but it's something. And especially if it allows for that connection. I mean, I'm kind of wondering, like with COVID, if there's been like a big jump in the tabletop, people playing tabletop games because of the isolation that everybody felt for a year and a half.
There definitely has been.
Yeah.
We've seen a huge boon in the amount of sales from like Wizards of the Coast, who owns Dungeons and Dragons and a bunch of other stuff. But also we've seen a huge rise in sort of like non-standard independent games. So more social games. There's I'm trying to think. There's a Jane Austen tabletop game that is just you play someone that's social and you go to parties and hang out with people, and that's it. And you try and you fall in love with people and hang out, and that's just the game.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ones like that sort of spawned during COVID, and the rise of sort of the use of these online tools like Roll20 and things like that. Even just playing over Zoom to connect people across areas to then, hey, let's all hang out together and do this fun adventure. but also language barriers as well.
Yeah.
I know people that have a tough time verbalizing in general. Really are drawn to sort of these play by post setups,
Okay.
where you might have a whole day to take your turn and really think through what you want to do and write it out and all this kind of stuff. And you sort of, so there's been a huge boost in it, and I think it's also broadened the accessibility of tabletop gaming. One, in that it's not just dragons and elves and stuff. It's more these social games, but also because of the remoteness, it increased the accessibility in general of a lot of these gaming communities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was going to be my next question was, is there a lot of people playing these on Zoom now? Because everybody knows how to use Zoom now. I would imagine, and I mean, what a cool thing to think about. Like, you could be playing it with somebody in France and somebody in Japan and somebody in South Africa. That would be really cool.
Yeah, a lot of the big tabletop gaming conventions this year were remote, and you were playing with people all over the place.
That's
And
amazing.
kind of like, oh, look, it's my cat, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's fun. But having online translating abilities through a lot of them is really cool. And then also sort of these macro systems where you can sort of like push the button and say hello, and then it'll show them in whichever language they choose and things like that. But also like people that have visual challenges, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can easily get the text to speak to work through for like these scenarios, or people that have difficulty hearing, right? You can see like the transcripts of these things, and it became like this whole like really, really nice thing.
Wow. Yeah, that's really cool. What else should we talk about? Do you have a favorite tabletop game?
I like the weird ones. So I'm not, this is gonna, people are gonna be mad at me. I'm not like a D&D guy, right? I don't like I don't like the rules, right?
Okay.
Or I don't like the math.
Uh-huh.
I did that enough in college. I'm not gonna now. I like the games that are a little more story driven, where it's just us hanging out as friends, telling a story. I think the closest I normally get is Dungeon Crawl Classics. This shirt, because it's more rules light than D&D,
Okay.
and so you can be weird with it, have fun, and do sort of whatever you want. I really like the cyberpunk ones because I like that futurism.
Okay.
And what else? I don't know. I like little one-offs. There's a game called 10 Candles that's very much story driven, but it's a spooky, scary one, and it's spooky, scary season. So
it is.
Yeah.
It is. I tried one out recently that incorporated tarot cards, and it was a blast. I loved it.
Fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not like a big 10,000 dice kind of guy, and a lot of people really like that because it narrows the decisions you make.
Sure.
So one thing, I guess I should mention, the sort of like using it as a tool of empathy is interesting because if you play a traditional game, you're not making the character. Well, you can. It's done a lot of different ways, but a lot of times, all the books, I'm trying to look around for one of the books, will have just tables, and you roll a die, and it's just, okay, cool. I'm male presenting. Okay, cool. It says I'm a 6 out of 10 on the Kinsey scale. Okay, roll this dice. I'm a peasant. Okay. I was born rich, single parent. Okay. And then now, and you roll dice on tons and tons and tons of tables. And now I have a random character, and I will play them as my role. I've also seen it done in schools where you write down challenges that you face on a piece of paper, and those become the challenges that another player will end
Oh,
up
wow.
having, right?
Yeah.
And so then you can see you can see someone else kind of like playing with you a little bit, right?
Right.
But as a role of empathy, or as a game of empathy, it's huge, because you have to make decisions for this other person. You've never had to think about what it's like to be, XYZ, whatever. And a lot of times it'll be, there's like that classic sort of what is it, like a screenwriting game where you have a friend ask people, what do they think of when they see me, right?
Mhm.
And you sort of get an idea of what roles you're good at when you act, right? And then just do the opposite and play that as a game character. So be the opposite of your embodiment and
Yeah.
see how it works, right? But purposefully put yourself in someone else's shoes.
Yeah.
And a lot of games like I think a lot of times they do it for sort of representation, but like D&D or fantasy games will have like, there's like the classic, like the combat wheelchair. I think, no, that's just what they called it. I think it's like the dungeon wheelchair or something like that.
Yeah, I think you're the combat wheelchair. I briefly saw an article about it.
People
Yeah.
really didn't, I don't know if they
Yeah,
like
it
that or
got a
not.
lot of negative
Yeah.
pushback, right?
But there's the idea of play a character that has challenges in their life, right? And a lot of the games will say for every boon you pick up, you have to pick up something that's a challenge for them. And so I encourage you to try and pick ones that could be found in the real world, not just a wizard's after me, right?
Right.
But a lot of these giant tables of sort of backgrounds will have different challenges. Try them out.
Yeah.
It's a very powerful empathy tool, and also learning how to sort of like help other people, right? And it's not. I don't think there's anything wrong with putting yourself in their shoes and trying to work through it to see a hint of what it might be like.
Well, and especially when you're in a collaborative context where, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but for most of these games, like everybody has a common goal, right? You're on this quest together. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
because
you're a group.
You have to, not only do you have to put yourself in that person's shoes, but you have a real motivation to be successful at it and to collaborate with everybody else. So it's not, I think having that additional piece really does take it to a place of empathy beyond like a superficial. Yeah. It's interesting that you brought up Dungeons and Dragons. I think I was going to ask about it because like I said, I had seen some comments about how it wasn't always super inclusive. So I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about the history or what you know about
the history of tabletop gaming.
Yeah, just
what?
like why do some people have this perception of it as being like super not inclusive or have like a really negative perception of it?
Why do I think is because I would say there was a thing called the Satanic Panic in the was it like whatever 80s 90s. And the idea was people thought that D&D was occultish and bad. And so it tended to be people that were looking for community that were drawn to it. And and I feel like people that sort of like had other stuff to do didn't. Because it was sort of this thing that wasn't that was not for mainstream, and so it became really these niche communities. of basement dwellers, such as myself, right? And you need advocates for a group, right? And so if it's just a bunch of cis white nerds down in a basement, all the characters in it are going to be cis white nerds in their basement, and I think it wasn't until the aughts that it started becoming more acceptable, or not acceptable, but it wasn't like this thing for weirdos anymore.
Okay.
And so then as more people played it, more people could write themselves into it, right? And there's also some problematic past with D&D specifically, and sort of like high fantasy in general, which maybe for a different cast, I don't know. But yeah, so I feel like it's because it's newer to the world, or its popularization is newer, and so we're getting a lot more diversity and a lot more representation in these games because a lot more people are playing them. So D&D and most tabletop games have some sort of open license, right? Where you can write an adventure and you can publish it online. Go to drivethrurpg.com. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of adventures for playing in various games. And you'll find representation of everyone, anyone and everyone in those communities. But because these things are relatively new, it's sort of blossoming. So be part of that solution. If you don't feel like you're represented well in the tabletop world, start writing fun adventures. Hang out with me. We'll write them together. It'll be great. And we'll get them out there. But I do believe it's because it's relatively new. Way back in the day, D&D was just meant to be a board game with really complicated rules based on these old wargaming things where it's like, I have a soldier and I have a tank. I'm going to move them around, and the soldier gets to move 1 and the tank gets to move 4, right? Which you can find.
So it had like an actual board and everything. Does it still have a board?
D&D sometimes. It was, but originally it was just meant to be sort of this rules heavy board game that you played. And they were like room size games. Because it was based on what do you call it? Sort of like I'm going to push the army with my stick, kind of like war scenarios for actually training generals and stuff like that.
Makes me think of like Game of Thrones when she's standing in that cave and they have all the. Have you ever?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of like the inception of these sorts of games is chess to war games to sort of like these really technical board games. And what happened was players just started writing like splash sheets or their own separate little zine style things, because you would be playing this little board game person and they go on an adventure, they fight a bunch of orcs, they find some treasure, you start to put yourself in there, or you personify it in one way or another. And you say like, well, this little dude's going to go to this and she's going to go over here, right? And then you start to give them names and personalities and things like that. But and with 5th edition, there are so many backgrounds and scenarios for you to play with for like even just in character building. Sometimes I just like to make characters and then leave them and never play them. I just want to make a little person and see all the things.
That sounds like an amazing job. Like my job is literally to just make up people with cool characteristics and fun attributes and
Oh, no, that's just for fun. No, yeah, the past of these things is And now we're in a place where again, like the Jane Austen role-playing game is super cool. You've got very cinematic games, games that are, where you're just a bird just flying around and looking at things. Anything, it's just a shared storytelling game, right?
Yeah.
And again, check out Drive Through RPG. Just
Okay.
download. You can find a role-playing game for like $2. That'll be really cool. You'll support some independent artists, but they're not all like these big combat games, and they don't all involve a lot of dice.
Yeah.
But
it looks like there is actually a question in the chat. I just realized.
Cool.
Are there learning opportunities in RPGs to experience the life of a character who faces oppression or difficulties a privileged player may not have dealt with before? And how do you manage that as a game master?
Sure. So, you have to be sensitive to the idea of, are we making a game out of a past, right? Something that someone might struggle with. But there are sort of like these classic analogs in role-playing games that are, this is this fantasy character, right? This is this fantasy group that is oppressed, and how do you work through that? So when I talked about like sort of problematic role-playing games, there's like, it's like canonical that elves are racist towards dwarves. The end, it's just like, that's part of it. And vice versa. They don't like each other. And you can sort of work through some of these ideas in a taking a step back kind of way, right? With them, you do have to toe the line, because it's a game, and so are we making a game out of something that's difficult for someone else, right? But you can put players in scenarios and see how they act, and see how they respond. There's the classic idea of you pull philosophical arguments out and you see how they act, face them with moral dilemmas, face them with an insurmountable oppressor, and see how it goes, right? Because like the classic player wants to be the rebellion, right? I want to rise up, and you just can't, that's not realistic in a lot of situations, and so you sort of have to play through these ideas. I hope that answers kind of.
No, it makes a lot of,
it
really resonates with me when you said that, because like I said, the one time I tried to play this, I was definitely like, everybody else was kind of like, oh, I'm going to go over here and check this thing out. Okay, I'm going to look in this window. And I was like, I'm going to go blow up a tree. I mean, it just.
I dare you. No.
Immediately, I was like, I'm not pussyfooting around. I'm just going to go for it. And it really it's funny because I wouldn't say I'm normally like that in real life. So it kind of like, looking back now, I'm like, does that tell me something about myself? Like, have you learned things about yourself that you didn't know until you started participating in role-playing games?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Well, only by comparison, I suppose. Like, I don't deal well with confrontation regularly, right? And in the games, it depends on my role, right? When you do this long enough, you just sort of like start to play them all. I like a good hero's journey in my game, right? I like that full arc. But yeah, I wish I was a bunch of different things in these role-playing games. I'm trying to think how to answer it best. You start to realize where, I guess, a little bit of bravery and a little bit of forethought are helpful, right? And I tend to be pretty logical in regular day-to-day life. I don't deal well with confrontation, and so what would I do if faced with a confrontation that I could not avoid? And you sort of like start to think, what's the healthiest option for this guy,
Mhm.
not this guy, and then take some of that back with you.
Mhm.
Yeah. I hope I answered their question.
I think so. I mean,
Okay.
it's
Chime in again if you want to follow up.
it's funny because I just have so many thoughts like running through my head as we're having
Yeah.
this discussion. What about this? What about this? What about this? But then I'm like listening, so then it goes right on.
Mhm.
Let me check the chat. We've got about 10 minutes left. So now's your chance. Ask questions, make comments.
Oh, now that I think about it, specifically when you're talking about experiencing things from a place of privilege, specifically that last question, I just remembered. You should check out that Reacting to the Past series. There are quite a few really, really good ones that deal with those specific issues. And they're created by academics. They are created for I think it's freshman level college class, and they're done in a very respectful, it's a historical look, right?
Okay.
And so you are playing these different characters in history, and they're not all name brand people, right? A lot of times it's just you're this person living in France during the revolution. You're this person living in whatever. There's tons of them. They're great. You do I think you do need an academic license or you need to work for a university to get access to some of them.
Okay.
But look around. Right. The internet is vast. And maybe start up a group at your through a local university or a local nonprofit or something like that.
What was it called again?
So they're called Reacting to the Past.
Reacting to the Past. Okay.
And they're I cannot can't give them enough praise.
Yeah.
Love them.
I would like to try that.
Let's do it. I'll play. Night. Yeah, I'll play some games.
I don't think we have any more comments or questions. Is there any last things that you would like to share? Any specific experiences? Any specific other things that folks should check out before we wrap up?
So I would like to, because we talked a lot about like emotional, mental, social challenges, but I cannot recommend enough. If I've heard great things about people playing like these futuristic games where for instance, or that sort of have like analogs to ways to deal with physical challenges right here today, right? So my one example that I really like is in a lot of these games, a cochlear implant, right, is a bonus ability. Like you would get that and be better than everyone else, right? Because you can tune into stuff. And modern day technology, I can't remember who makes the bone ones that are like little cube shapes, but you can hook it up to Bluetooth, right? You can amplify your hearing, not just receive things, but like tune into government satellites or whatever. Like right now, right? You can use this technology to have better advantages than everyone else right now. There are a lot of these technologies, right? You think of some of these new 3D printed prosthetics that are way incredibly strong, right? And so in these games, you are taking these things that we would have traditionally been thought as impediments, and they become boons, right? And that future is now and on the horizon, right? With current technology and current capabilities, right? And I always thought that that's the coolest thing in the world. You know, the combat wheelchair feels weird, right? But the idea of having a neural implant, right, which currently people are working on building,
Right.
to give me faster reaction times,
Right.
and then being able to tune that up and having a faster reaction time than someone that did not have this thing,
Yeah.
is really cool, right? Anyway, just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah. I think that's what's so fascinating about this whole world is just totally rewriting, you know, the assumptions and the preconceived notions that we come into different social situations with, and just kind of going like, well, let's just take that and turn it upside down.
Yeah.
It sounds amazing. Sounds like so much fun, and I'm really looking forward to getting more into that world.
Yeah.
I did want to share information with folks about Nerd Night so that everybody knows if they want to come out and give this a shot. Here is the information.
Yeah, please come join us. There are also plenty of tabletop communities in Flagstaff and on the interwebs. And also, just if you want to play a tabletop game with me, I don't know, look me up. We'll hang out. But I host the Nerd Nights. It's the second Tuesday of every month at Historic. It's from like 4 to 9. We'll run a bunch of stuff. It'll be great.
Yeah.
Come hang out.
I love it.
Also, we do sort of immersive and interactive theater in town. We have a Halloween show coming up.
Nice.
There's a bunch of different games. It's a cyberpunk laser tag with an interesting story. We have some cool actors. Come check that out. Peppercorngames.com if you want tickets. And pick a role. Play as that character.
Very cool. That sounds amazing. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today. This was really great, and I definitely learned a lot about this community, and I'm looking forward to getting to know all these interesting people.
Thanks for chatting with me. It was great.
Thanks everybody out there in internet land for tuning in.
Bye, pals.
Yeah. Check out our Facebook page or our website for more fun events. We've got a fair coming up on November 6th for Native American Heritage Month. We're going to have Indigenous musicians, artists, cultural workshops. It's going to be really fun time. 12 to 5 on Saturday, November 6th. Thanks again, John. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.